We don't have to try any harder. We don't need to fight anymore. We don't have to try any harder, no.
Hey, hey, Jacob.
Hi, Scott.
Do you want to share with listeners what we were just saying about the Nordby brothers, or no?
I think we'll pull the curtain of charity over that for right now.
Yes.
How are you, my friend?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, I'm
Are
feeling really good today.
you in your own place, or are you cat sitting or something right now?
No, I'm recording from my friend's place right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
And
was admiring the create behind you, and it looks like paintbrushes in the stand, not far over your shoulder.
yeah, he's a wildly creative human being.
Oh,
So it's
cool.
fun to be in. This is kind of his studio office space, and it's a good place to be. In Santa Fe, still in Santa Fe.
Oh, that's so cool. I don't know if you've noticed this. I know you were off grid for 10 days or so, and but I've noticed a distinct sense of thaw energetically. It felt like there was this big, really hard contraction a few weeks ago, and I'm sure it had a lot to do with politics and recession news and all that stuff. I've just noticed not like this big, complete thaw, but a sense of, okay, people are breathing again, people are melting again. Things are starting to move a little bit. I'm curious if you've noticed any of that.
Honestly, Jacob, I've been so completely off grid. I mean, I
Mm,
really did put my phone away for 9 days without checking it, without doing anything with it.
wow.
So for me, there was definitely a big thaw. But I will say, when I came back out and spoke with a dear friend, like, hey, is there anything I should know about in the world? And he was like, honestly, aside from just the general insanity of this country and the world we live in, there hasn't been anything specific to send everyone spiraling over the last week and a half. So
Yeah.
he was definitely tuning into what you're saying.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got COVID 2.5 weeks ago, and my body is just now kind of being done with that. And my brother and his wife also got it, so that's been interesting. This latest spin of that whole thing. I'm feeling grateful to be, back on my feet, back out running trails and stuff. But it was an interesting few weeks there just to kind of be with that, and also as I sat with it and journaled and things, it's like, yeah, I actually needed a deep rest. I needed more rest than I usually give myself, and I guess I'm a slow learner, Scott, but I think learning to listen to the body, listen to my body, and go, yeah, if I'd been paying closer attention, I still may have gotten COVID, but I certainly had burned my energy reserves up quite a bit. So,
Yeah. And how are you feeling now?
oh, I feel so much better. Yeah.
Good. Good. Yeah, I remember you were kind of sick the last time we talked, but it didn't seem it didn't seem like you were ready to say it was COVID, or that you didn't know that it was COVID yet. So
I still
um,
don't know. I didn't get a test. My brother and his wife had similar symptoms, and she works in a corporate office, so she had a test, and it was confirmed. And it sounds a lot like whatever the latest variant of this thing
I
is.
know, I
So,
know, keeps going and going.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm on the other side of the ceremony I mentioned in the last episode that I couldn't talk about, and still can't still am not going to talk about, other than to say, uh, yeah, it was extraordinary. It felt, just from the phone perspective, it felt so easy to put my phone away. And
Mm,
I was sitting with why, and this isn't a new idea, but I realized that, I was so engaged in what I was doing. I was so engaged in my life and so present in the ceremony and what was going on there, that I just wasn't thinking about my phone at all.
hmm.
And I've often thought of that as not only the secret to transcending phone addiction, but when I look at addiction in general, so often we're steering toward our addictions with whatever it is because of some level of unfulfillment with an aspect of our life in the present moment. And I
Mhm.
think being in this ceremony really highlighted that for me, the ease with which I was able to just put my phone away completely and not think about it at all
Mm.
for 9 days, compared to my relationship with my phone going into the ceremony, which was one of just addiction
Mhm.
and compulsion.
Mhm.
And even since I've gotten out of ceremony, a few days ago, I've definitely been with my phone more. It's felt less addictive and less anxiety provoking, almost like, when let's say when I stop eating sugar, and then I decide, well, I'm going to eat sugar again. And that first bite of sugar, I can tell something's being lit up inside, but I'm not fully ready to down a pint of Haagen-Dazs right away. But by a weekend, I'm back to eating my Haagen-Dazs pints in a sitting. Like, I haven't reached that point with the phone yet where I'm completely wired to it again.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is the more we create lives we don't feel we need to escape from,
Mhm.
the less likely we are to be addicted to our escapes. And that's not to discount. I believe there is a disease element to addiction, but I don't believe that's the full story around addiction. And if it were, then we all have the disease, because everyone I know is addicted to something in some way or another.
Yeah.
And I just think that we're so well served by doing what we can to create lives that feel fulfilling.
Mhm.
I mean, that's an obvious statement, but in relation to our addictive habits specifically,
You thought you
I
were
think
saying something super controversial, and we were
I
gonna have
know.
a fight on the air, right?
Yeah. I know you're really well served by creating a fulfilling life, man.
Totally
That's like
disagree.
that's the
Totally,
ticket, man.
totally disagree, bro.
Imagine if you went at me. It's like, no, no, man, we're well served by creating crappy lives. That's how we grow.
I don't think I'm a good enough actor to pull that off, honestly. Oh my God. Well, I'm curious. This is not a deep question for you, Scott, but for those who are interacting with our show here, I'm curious. Those of you who have watched it on YouTube or watched it on the video on Spotify, I'm curious, how is it for you to actually see us rather than just hear us? It's always a little bit of a barrier for me to get, sit here and stare into the beady eye of my laptop camera like this. And that's not such the barrier. The barrier is me watching myself back and seeing how weirdly I talk. But aside from that,
Yeah, I haven't watched any of it. And I thought you were going to say staring into the beady eye of my podcast partner.
I don't think your eyes are all that beady, Scott. I think.
I think it's good that you're bringing this up, because I don't even know if everyone realizes that you can watch this now. As
Mhm.
of the last few, I think, right? That you can, if you want to watch us instead of just listening to us, which you absolutely may not want to do, but you have that option on YouTube and on Spotify.
On Spotify, yeah, and Scott just started a very specific, dedicated YouTube channel to the show, so we'll start loading those videos up. And once one of us has a little more space and time, we can start loading up at least the audios onto that YouTube channel as well, from our past. This is episode number 44, Scott. So I'm kind of
It's
surprised at how these
incredible.
things just keep stacking up.
I know, 44. I like
Yeah,
that number. I love
yeah,
8. Jacob, have we talked about the Enneagram, and are you into it, and do you know your type?
yeah.
What's your type?
I'm a 4.
I knew. I mean, not that you're supposed to type people, but I'm like, he's definitely a 4.
Well, okay. So, what were the clues for you? I know enough about it to feel conversant, but not enough to feel like I'm deeply, knowledgeable in the topic. So, what were the clues for you that I'm a 4?
I guess just creative, moody, prone, prone to prone to heaviness, prone to feeling like an outsider,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not even speaking to who you are in this moment now, but
Sure.
like, so I've been giving a lot of energy to the Enneagram, and a dear friend of mine is way into the Enneagram.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been having lots of conversations, and I still haven't figured out my number, or my type rather, but I was fairly convinced I was a 4, and I
Mm-hmm.
just ruled myself out as a 4. So
Because
I listened to Richard Rohr. You know Richard Rohr?
Yeah,
I didn't realize he was one of the preeminent voices in the Enneagram.
I didn't
And
either. That's
yeah, and
fascinating.
he has this workshop on YouTube that's over 6 hours long, and he really breaks down all the types. And I was listening to him, and for the first time, I heard someone talk about the four in a way where I felt clear it wasn't me.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was like the way he kind of talked about the four. It was like the goth kids in high school, all black, like obsessed with tragedy. That was just never who I was. Like I definitely have felt throughout my life in different ways as an outsider,
Mhm.
for sure. But I haven't felt like someone who wants to mire himself in tragedy and despair, and haven't felt like someone who is prone to depression
Mhm.
necessarily in the way I feel like maybe other fours are,
Mhm.
you know. But again, I'm
Well,
still figuring it out.
yeah, I find that fascinating because certainly as a young person, I was definitely not the goth kid, or I didn't even experience um, what I would call depression until, well, it's funny. When I left home, I went back to Bible college, Scott, and that was the first time I experienced and I didn't even know what to call it. That's how unfamiliar it was to me because I was always very sunny, very positive, and something about the destabilization of leaving home, even though I was going directly into an environment that was very much like home in terms of the rules and the beliefs and all that stuff. But I remember walking through a graveyard near the Bible college in Illinois, and I did not know what to call this feeling that I was having. And so I would sit there and I would brood, and I think I wrote some poetry. um,
You're a
yeah,
four, of course you did.
how to tell people you're a four without saying you're a four.
Yeah,
Uh,
go to the cemetery and write poetry while brooding.
very broody. No, and yeah, and it wasn't until much later in life, my 30s, when we've talked about this multiple times, when I really, had a breakthrough experience. That was when I felt that I began to really experience more areas of my life that I've been keeping, the doors shut on. And that included a lot of very, very deeply four emotions and melancholy and depression and things like that. And it's also where I began to really open up to the creative side of myself, in ways that I never had. And so, yeah, I've always been fascinated by Enneagram. And I'm curious, with some of your study, like, do you notice yourself interacting with people or noticing their likely style? Does it inform you in any way?
It doesn't really inform me now because it's still really new to me.
Hmm.
I'm learning more and more about it, but very recently. But it's hard not to, and they tell you, don't type other people because you never really know. It's hard not to reflect on the people closest to you and be like, "Oh my God, he's such a three," or like, or whatever it is you feel they are. I
Yeah.
think what's so wild about it for me is how much trouble I'm having actually locking into my type.
Hmm.
After I've probably read two books, I've read any number of things online, I've taken the test.
You
It's
have.
like, oh yeah, I've done a lot of things,
Hmm.
and I still, I mean, I'm honing in, but I'm still not entirely clear.
I'm not sure if it's the 2 or the 9 that tends to have the most difficulty actually identifying, you know, and I don't know enough
It's the
about it.
9, and that's like for sure where I'm leaning.
Okay.
Richard Rohr says, if you can't figure out your type, you're a 6 or a 9 most of the time.
Oh,
And
fascinating.
I'm not a
Okay.
6, no.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Like, what is it? The 3. So, Dr. Zach Bush, who I've been really enjoying a lot lately, he's a 3, and he pointed out that so was JFK and so was Hitler. So it's interesting to note these other, notable people who have that same pattern, and how it can show up in such beautiful, powerful ways, and how it can show up in such ugly, powerful ways. In the 3 case, but eights, I tend to have a lot of difficulty with eights. Donald Trump is an 8. I know a number of 8s, and in their light, in their more healed expression, those are such powerful. I mean, they just fucking make things happen in this
Yeah.
world. Just powerful. When they're not in their strength and their light, they can be very overbearing, dismissive, bullies. I mean, there's just
Yeah.
a lot of energy like that going on. So it's interesting to me. Like, there's always two sides of the coin.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's with everything. I mean, for those of you who are listening and like, what are these guys talking about for the past 10 minutes? The Enneagram is this, I mean, I think it's like 2,500 years old. I mean, it's this ancient
Yeah.
system of essentially categorizing. I'm probably going to butcher what it really is, but essentially categorizing personality types.
Mm-hmm.
The ways in which, and it's really rude. Each type, it's really based on your primal fear,
Hmm.
right? Like each type has a main fear by which they are directed when they're living in the unhealthy version of their type.
Mm-hmm.
And each type has a what would the word be? Like a goal, whatever, when they're
Aspiration.
aspiration, thank you, when they're living in the healthy version. So to
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying, Jacob, I think that's the case with everything. When we
Mm-hmm.
bring, whether you can apply astrology the same way, you can take a Scorpio,
Mm-hmm.
and Scorpios get a bad rap for being insane or whatever, super intense and super whatever. But it's like, yeah, unhealthy Scorpios, unhealthy Taurians are going to have these patterns, and healthy
Yeah.
Taurians, healthy Scorpios will have these patterns.
Yeah.
I think it all speaks to the importance of this kind of work, like working on your healing, working
Mm-hmm.
on your growth, because you're going to bring health to whatever, however it is. Let's say you believe that you came into this world wired to show up in a specific way. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the healthier you become, the less likely you are to show up in that way, in a way that feels toxic, and the more likely you are to find and mine the gifts of that specific way of being and bring that forward into your life.
It's so well said, man. Yeah, I've spotted a spiralic pattern of, and we've talked about this before, Scott, but of self-discovery, and which once I begin to learn this is who I am, truly this is who I am, it leads to self-acceptance, and those two ingredients together really allow space for transformation, and transformation just being. I am becoming more of who I really am at
Yes.
the deep code soul level. I'm becoming more and more of that. In fact, I'm just now writing a book with my writers community. We do a silent writing thing a couple times a month where we just sit there silently writing together for an hour. It's virtual, so it's Zoom.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me how much I can get done in an hour. So it's quite selfish, even though I'm leading one of those sessions each month. I'm actually sitting there writing on a project right now, but I'm writing a story of an acorn that becomes a seedling, and I think I may have even mentioned this in the show before. But it's becoming a book that'll likely be sort of like a Shel Silverstein book, so illustrated and larger and fewer words on the page. But I'm really excited about it. But it really speaks to this, Scott, like that. The insanity, and it's part of every one of our lives. The insanity of what happens, we have to learn by mimicry. That's how we learn to walk and talk and take a shit and eat food and read and write
Mhm.
and everything, which means that there's nothing wrong with being socialized, but it also leads to a place where many of us find ourselves in our 30s or 40s or maybe 50s going, I don't even know who I am. I really don't even know who I am or what I truly desire. And so for me, it's been a lifelong quest, and especially in the last 10 years of saying, how can I share a process with people and live it myself of delving into this is who I really am. This is who I really am. And then how can I spot the places where I've developed distortions in that through survival strategies or coping mechanisms? How have I learned to survive in ways that are actually bending me away from my true nature? And then how can I gently begin to move back in that direction?
That's beautiful. I mean, first, I want to say I didn't know about this book, and that's really exciting. I can't wait to read it and see it. And what you're speaking to for me is also the compulsion in the self-help world to always try to fix,
Yes.
fix ourselves. There's so much focus on fixing that. And so often what we do by trying to fix ourselves is we try to change aspects of ourselves that are not meant to be changed,
Right.
right? Instead of
That's right.
doing our best to bring acceptance to the fullness of our personalities, right? And understanding that we're all idiosyncratic. You
Hmm.
know, we all have our quirks. We all have our ways of being that we actually are born with. Like I'm wired to be more tidy. It's my way. You know, that feels natural for me. That feels more peaceful to me when I'm in an environment that doesn't feel chaotic and
Hmm.
filled with stuff. You know, I'm an anti-hoarder in that way.
Hmm.
And I can look at that if I want to through my mind's eye and judge myself like, why don't you just be more relaxed and be more comfortable and spread stuff out and whatever. And yes, there's room for me to be more relaxed within the context of my personality that likes tidiness, sure, while at the same time just accepting, no, this is just part of who I am. This is how I
Yeah.
was born into this world. There's nothing wrong with it. And I'm only creating grief for myself by trying to change an aspect of myself that doesn't need changing and isn't going to change.
Hmm.
Right? Why would I do that to myself? Why not instead spend my energy encouraging myself to just accept this aspect of myself, love it,
Yeah.
and find ways to bring more peace to it if I feel the need to.
Yes. Oh my God, I love this topic, Scott. I had no idea we'd go here today, as usual.
I was going to say
Um,
yes. It's a standard statement by one of us.
yeah, I was like, oh shit, okay, we're going there. No, I love this because, and I feel so strongly that the last at least 2 or 3 thousand years, probably more, of human history has been really plagued by, probably 6 or 8 thousand years, plagued by the underlying notion, belief in original sin, which basically says I am broken and need a savior.
Mm-hmm.
That's the core of it, and it's made its way into politics and business and marketing, and every part of our lives really is infected by that basic story, the narrative. I'm broken and need a savior. And so I feel like what that leads to is then constantly looking for a guru or a master, which you and I have both experienced in our lives, and saying, okay, so the way to enlightenment, the way to inner peace, the way to wealth, the way to six pack abs, the way to whatever it is we want, riches, is all I have to do is find somebody who's doing it. And then I just trim my behavior to model what they're doing. And then I'll have what they have. And holy shit, is that a fucked up way to live? Because it's never going to lead to peace.
Yeah. As much as I also still, I love teachers. You
Hmm.
know, I love learning from people. I feel like there are people who have mastered or are expert in certain aspects of life or who have wisdom to share, who have insights to share that are really beneficial, and that's beautiful.
Hmm.
Um, I think you're speaking to like taking them on as the one way and the only way. That's how we do a profound disservice to ourselves, and I agree with that. I just feel like sometimes the pendulum. We're in this moment of
Hmm.
of the pendulum swinging so far away from the guru that it
Hmm.
feels like a backlash against actually staying open to those who do have things to offer. Like if Eckhart Tolle is sitting in front of me, I assure you, I'm going to keep my mouth quiet and learn. If
Yes.
Byron Katie's sitting in front of me, I'm going to soak up anything I could possibly soak up from her, because as far as I recognize her wisdom,
Hmm.
right? So I don't want to steer, even though I had a guru that was, we've talked about it a lot here. So I've
Yeah.
been burned by the guru model intensely and by the cult model intensely. And still I want to keep my heart open to people whom I feel like are sharing beautiful insights and wisdom. And I wanted to say one other thing to what you were saying about this, but I forgot. I lost it.
I hope you remember it, because that is, to me, holding two ideas, that are seemingly opposed. And I so agree with you on so the need for true teachers. And there are plenty in this world, and I'm so grateful for them. I know some of them, and it's such a refreshing thing to watch. A true teacher will hold the knowing of what's possible for the student, and the Jungian, I've read and learned from so much. Robert A. Johnson, in his book Inner Gold, talks about that transfer, Scott, and why it's a needed part of the equation, and it's almost like a therapeutic relationship. in a therapeutic relationship, even if it's a therapist, a master therapist who's going in for their own therapy, they actually have to hand their gold in this story, the inner gold story. They have to hand their gold over to that other person so that they can, because it's heavy. Gold is heavy. And so your worth, your true value, your who you really are, can actually be too heavy. And so there's this experience of handing that over by virtue of projection and admiration of a teacher or a guru, and letting them carry it. Now, the trouble is, and Robert Johnson talks about this in that book, the trouble is when it's time to transfer the power back to the student. And if a guru can't do that, or a teacher can't do that, then they're locked into the I am the source of
Yes.
the wisdom and power and truth that you need. So I love, and I like using a more simple idea about it. A swim teacher who's standing, up to her chest in the water, and there's these shivering 6-year-olds on the edge of the pool, and they're all terrified. They don't know they can swim yet.
Right.
They are watching other people swim, so they believe it's possible, but maybe not for them. So the teacher actually has to hold the knowing, no, you absolutely can swim, and I'm going to help you learn how to do it.
Yeah.
But the minute that the kid is beginning to swim, now the teacher needs to back away and say, no, you've always had the power. It's like Dumbo's magic feather.
Yeah.
When the feather drops and the crow flies up and says, dude, the feather was never the magic. You're the magic.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love that swim metaphor. The sentence that keeps coming to my mind as we're talking about this and fixing ourselves is, I wish I weren't so. And I wonder, for
Hmm.
listeners, when you
Hmm.
catch yourself saying, I wish I weren't so, and
Hmm.
the whatever follows that so is an inherent aspect of your personality. What if instead what is a statement that isn't I wish I weren't so, but that I am willing to grow into my blank. I am willing to come into acceptance of this aspect of my personality. And so then
Hmm.
automatically what we're doing is we're eliminating the fight, we're eliminating the war against what is, when what
Hmm.
is an inherent part of who we are, a part of our personality. And we're bringing ourselves to a place of acceptance, to a place of acknowledgement first that this is who I am.
Hmm.
I am a big personality. This is
Hmm.
how I present myself in the world, not because of anything other than it's an aspect of how I show up.
Hmm.
And that's okay. And so instead of wishing I weren't a big personality, I'm going to be willing to accept my big personality,
Hmm.
and bring love to my big personality. And by doing so, see how I can show up with it potentially in ways that feel better for me. Jacob, I think so often
Hmm.
we try to silence everything we don't like about ourselves. We try to shutter it away, and it just becomes noisier. It just becomes more aggressive. It just continues to pound on the doors. And I've learned so much we've talked about this a lot, I feel, but I've learned so much by inviting those parts out, like opening the door and saying, okay, you can be really difficult for me, but you're welcome here too. I
Hmm.
love you too. And can we
Yes.
get more in the habit of doing that? And how does that change our lives when we do so?
Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot, and you
Uh-oh.
can feel free to do this with me if you want to afterwards. I'm curious if you have an aspect of your life that you used to try to really um, keep repressed or change or fix in some way, and as you began to come into this process for yourself, like I would love to hear a story if you can have one that comes to the top.
Envy.
Hmm.
My mind is incredibly envious.
Hmm.
I can get really, my mind can spin out on comparison and envy
Hmm.
again and again and again. And and I say my mind can instead of I am envious because it feels like a mind thing. When I'm
Sure.
in my heart, it's not my reality at all. Um, so that was something I used to lock away aggressively.
Hmm.
Even while I was feeling it, I used to pretend I wasn't feeling it. I used to be trying to talk myself out of it, even though my whole body is like uncomfortable in envy and in the comparison. And I don't do that anymore. When I'm feeling envious,
Hmm.
I'm like, okay, now you're feeling envious. That's how minds feel sometimes. You can sit at the table too. This is uncomfortable for me, and it's real, because I'm feeling it, because it's what my mind is thinking, but it's not true because it doesn't reside in love and in my heart. And so I bring myself back to the distinction between what is real and what is true. And I hold myself most connected to what is true, right? These envious thoughts are real because they exist. They're not true because they live in an ego mind. And what my mind is conjuring so often is false. So often it's a lie. Envy for me is a lie. It's rooted in scarcity. It's rooted in the notion that I'm not enough, that I'm unworthy. Those are all lies. So because my envy is rooted in those lies, I know it can't be true. Does that
Mm.
make sense?
Mhm.
And so oh, go ahead. What are you going
No,
to
no, I'm just making encouraging breathing sounds here.
say? wait, wait, wait a minute. I have to write that down because that might be a part of our title. I'm just making encouraging breathing sounds. And I think those things are helpful for me because it doesn't necessarily, talking ourselves through what we're going through doesn't necessarily get us to the other side of it.
Mhm,
And sometimes it does,
mhm,
but what it does do for me almost all the time is it interrupts the flow of that spin cycle of
mhm,
envy and of insanity. It
mhm,
interrupts it and it takes me to a different place with it, where at least I can look at it from a different angle instead of being the hamster on the wheel within it. And so for me, that's why it's always valuable to take a step back if you're able and become a bit more expansive in how you're experiencing whatever you're experiencing and look at it from that bird's eye view and ask yourself, is there something else going on here? Is there a different perspective I can bring to this in the moment? What does my heart have to say about this situation? What does love have to say about this situation?
mhm, mhm.
Mix it up.
I'm really glad that you chose, or that the idea of envy came to the top, because that's something that's so easy to judge. It's pejorative. It's like, how could envy ever be positive?
Mhm.
What I would love to do though, Scott, is actually go into that a little bit more with you and say, okay, so in envy, when there's comparison, where there's a sense of lack, like I'm not enough, I don't have what they have, or I'm not doing what they're doing. I'm curious what happens if we sit with that just a little bit and say, okay, so if we allow this to no longer be a demon, so it's this thought pattern that's locked up as a demon. Of course, you already do this, but I think for the benefit of the listeners in this
Mhm.
conversation, just going into it and saying, okay, so what is the core underneath everything about it that is negative? On the spectrum of the existence of this thing called envy, there's something in there that's positive. And what is that? Like when you feel into, okay, I see that this person is enjoying or doing or experiencing this, and I don't have that. I don't know if I'll ever have it. What in there, if we liberated it from the scarcity prison and all of that, what impulse in there is trying to move into health, can actually become an ally and no longer a demon?
Yeah, I think it's when you get honest with yourself, when you're able to step outside the shame you're likely
Mhm,
to feel for being envious and sit with what exactly it is you're envying,
mhm.
you can get clear about what your own desires are.
Oh, okay.
So, do you know what I'm saying? It's like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's not just, oh, they've sold a ton of books and I envy that. Maybe
Mhm,
maybe on the surface that's what it feels like, but what is it you're actually envying? Perhaps it's that there's someone out there who is living into their creativity in a way that you admire. And so that's an invitation for you to look at ways in which you can live into your creativity more fully.
mhm,
Maybe you're envying someone who has tons of friends and you feel really isolated. So what you're envying, and maybe we can transfer it to the word admire if you're getting in a healthier place in that moment.
mhm.
It's
Yeah.
like what you're envying slash admiring is this person's depth of connection with being. So that's an invitation again. What you feel,
Mm,
what you're missing in your life, or what you feel you're missing in your life, is connection.
right.
So where are the opportunities in your life to put more energy into creating more connection? Envy is a great guide in that way. When
Yeah.
you really let yourself sit with what precisely do you want about their life? What are you
Mhm,
longing for? And then if that's true, if it's beyond just I want to sell a million books, do you know what I mean? Those types of things. If you can if you can deepen it and get to the core of what that envy is, then you can apply that to your life and look at ways to create it for yourself. And understanding, of course, that you can only create it for yourself in your way, and it's going
Mhm.
to look like it needs to look for your life.
Right. Right. Oh my God, this is really good. Because what we're talking about here, Scott, is self-discovery. It is
Totally.
actually, and by not looking away from something that would be a shadow aspect like envy
Yes.
or lust or greed or whatever it is, by not looking away from it and saying, tell me more, tell me more, tell me
Yes.
more,
Yes. 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 Do that with everything. Do it with everything. I think we talked about this last week. It's like if you're lost in your anxiety, tell me more, anxiety.
Hmm. Hmm.
If you're in the depths of jealousy, tell me more.
Right.
Like, get in conversation with these things that are paralyzing you. Get in conversation with them. What are they trying to show you?
Well, and this goes back to the simple exercise that you framed earlier, which is, I wish I weren't so dot, dot, dot. And, so picking out an aspect of, okay, I wish I weren't so envious. Oh my God, I know this is holding me back. I shouldn't be envious. Envy is bad. Envy is one of the 7 deadly sins or whatever. So I love that you gave us a handhold on this practice, which is with the prompt, I wish I wasn't so dot, 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 and then begin to go into the inquiry about, first of all, just make the list. I think that's pretty easy for most of us to make because of our brain's negativity bias. It's pretty easy for us to make a list
Yeah, things we
of
weren't so.
the things that are shitty about us. I wish I weren't so
Exactly.
shitty. Well, and what's fascinating to me, and I feel like I'm leapfrogging a bit, so I want to make sure you bring us back to this practice because I feel like this is really a key, Scott. And this is nobody else's personality system or the time of your birth and where you were born. I mean, I love all of that stuff. This
Yeah.
is actually very, very personal and real. But what I love that starts to happen and has more and more opened up in my life is the more that I do this work for myself, the more I'm able to give that gift to other people. Not every day, not all the time, sometimes not even very often in a day. But the more I notice that I begin to look at other people with curious eyes and go, okay, this trait or behavior of theirs really fucking bugs me. I wish they wouldn't do that. And then because I've been giving myself the gift more and more of this kind of inquiry, this kind of self-acceptance and curiosity, I just noticed it becomes a little bit more reflexive with other people, a little bit more like, oh, I wonder what they're actually asking for here. I wonder what they
Yeah.
really do need in this situation.
Yeah, that's always the case. And it's always the case in the converse. Like, the
Hmm.
more hateful you are toward yourself, the more naturally hateful you're going to be toward other people.
Right.
These things, it is all energetic.
Hmm.
And so if we have as a base note a willingness and or commitment, ideally, to loving ourselves,
Hmm.
then we're constantly asking ourselves, how can I love myself through this?
Yes.
Right. So if envy's coming up and what you notice your mind doing is shaming yourself and berating yourself, and you just take the time, how can I love myself through this? It's going to invite a completely different invitation in your response to the envy.
Yeah.
And that is what is going to lead you to creating for yourself different relationships with all these aspects of yourselves that feel heavy and feel untenable and feel shameful. And this is how we not fix ourselves, but just come into better relationship with ourselves. And that's ultimately all I want. Like, because I'm really understanding, Jacob, more and more that all bets are off as far as how evolved I'm going to get in this lifetime. It's like I'm expecting to be with all these personality traits throughout my life. So for me, it's more about getting in friendship with all of them, learning to love them all, and
Hmm.
knowing that if I can do that, and I believe I can, and I believe we all can, um, I'm in a good place. Then suddenly I'm just in good relationship with all the aspects of myself, even the difficult ones.
Yeah, there's I was looking for it a moment ago. I wasn't texting someone. I was actually trying to search for this specific quotation, but it's been attributed to Lao Tzu. Probably not. It's probably just in the Taoist or Buddhist tradition somewhere. Um, but stress is when you are outside of who you really are, and peace is when you're just being yourself, and that's totally fucked up. I did not quote that properly, but basically, when I'm outside of who I really am, I'm going to experience stress, and when and anxiety, and probably depression, and probably all sorts of actual mental illnesses. The more that I can come back into alignment and relaxation within this is who I really am, the more peace I can experience. And I remember another piece by Anthony DeMello, Scott,
Mhm.
and I was looking for that a moment ago too. But he said, I was neurotic and crazy for so long in my life, and I was trying to change. I was trying to become the better person, this aspirational figure I wanted to be. And he said, and it got worse and worse until someone came along and said, don't change. I love you exactly as you are. I love
Yeah.
you right now. Don't change. Don't change at all. I think you're fascinating and brilliant and interesting. And it's okay if you're crazy. Like, I love you. I love you. I love the crazy you. And he said, what's fascinating is that the moment that happened, he said then that was the moment I began to relax. And that was the moment I began to change.
Yeah.
And he said years later, I found myself in a state that I only could have hoped for the years before, when I was so stressed out about trying to change, trying to model my behavior after other people.
Beautiful. For those of you listening, so you be the one to give yourself that permission.
That's right.
Don't wait for someone else to give you the permission to not change. Give yourself permission to be who you are as much as you are able, and notice the places. I think because there are so many modalities and so many tools and so many different things on this healing journey, and so many beautiful ones,
Yeah.
and so many helpful tools. And when we get caught up in the idea that we're doing all this to fix something about ourselves, we can lose ourselves. We
Yes.
can actually potentially do more damage than help. But if we can hold on to the notion that we're actually not trying to fix ourselves, no matter whether it's meditation or NLP or EMDR or breath work or whatever, or journaling,
Sure.
we're actually just getting into a place of remembering who we really are and bringing grace and love to who we really are.
Right.
That's all the journey is. We don't have to change anything. And then somehow for me, Jacob, what it becomes is it's less daunting when I
Hmm.
feel like I have to somehow change a core aspect of my personality to feel okay. That feels like a big task. But when I look at, I really just need to bring love to these aspects of myself,
Hmm.
not change them. That still feels like a task because we're not trained to do it. We're
Right.
trained to shame, but it feels so much more palatable and also so much more enjoyable. It's
Right.
like, oh, for me, this exercise isn't just showering love on all aspects of myself.
Right.
That's fun, you know?
You use one of the primary themes of your work is learning to accept and love yourself. One thing I've noticed as a pattern also, Scott, is and I love it because you're expressing the same thing in a different way, is you're enough. I saw one of your pieces float by the other day on social media, and it was like, you're so enough. I'm shocked, or whatever you said, by how enough you are. And I love that, because that's the same energy. It's
Yeah.
looking for those spots in my life where I feel like I'm not enough, and
Mhm.
then saying, what if I, just the curious question, what if I am, though? What if I really am enough in this moment, in this situation? What if I take a breath right now and let it out, and face the facts of the circumstance, and then face the reality, tell myself the truth that, oh no, I actually am alive right now. I'm alive in this moment. I'm not being killed. I'm not being destroyed by this moment, by whatever's going on. Um, beginning to This is where I feel like we begin to heal the roots of scarcity. We begin to heal the
Yes.
roots of original sin beliefs, that I'm broken, that I'm irretrievably broken, um, that need something outside of myself to fix me or save me or rescue me. Um, and that's where, Scott, just that simple shift for me in my life. I remember being 6 or 7 years ago, being really in the depths of really some depression and being very afraid that I would run out of time in my life. And basically the core underlying is lack, and it's the belief that I'm not enough. I'm not enough.
Mm. Yeah.
I'll never accomplish the things that matter to me in my life. And I remember sitting there and having the guide show up during a meditation thing, and I was having a hard time settling into, that peaceful state that we all want in meditation. And the guides were like, why do you believe you're out of time? Why do you believe you're out of money? Why do you believe you're not enough? And I had no answer for that. And they said, just what if for a few moments you allow yourself to know the truth that in this moment, not the next moment or 5 minutes from now or the next day or whatever, in this moment, you are enough, you have enough time, you have enough space, you have enough money, you have enough, you are enough. And that was a transformational moment for me. And I began to use that as a practice whenever I'd feel anxiety. It's like, what if I am enough? What if connected to source, connected to the greater, everything? I'm not cut off. I'm not isolated from all the resources and time and ideas and everything that I need. What if that could be true in this moment? How would I feel? And just breathing into that would begin to change that moment.
Yeah. And then apply that beyond yourself to your circumstance in the moment. It's like, what if just sitting on my butt on the couch, not doing anything is enough?
Right.
What if, as I'm binging a Netflix show, this too is enough?
Right.
Right? Instead of shaming ourselves, instead of judging ourselves for these choices, what if we can bring everything you just said, not only to who we are, but to the choices we're making in our lives throughout the day? Instead of feeling like we're only enough if blah, 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 blah. And maybe that's another list that we can all be making. What are those things for you? I only feel like I'm enough if I'm, and then write that list down and look at the ways in which you've been conditioned to believe that your worth is dependent on these types of actions that you're
Right.
taking. This is the way we start to deconstruct it. This is the way we come back to the truth, which is that we're inherently worthy. We're inherently enough. If you're born, you're enough. Period.
Right.
Can you
Right.
really accept that?
Right.
Can you, Jacob? Can you really accept that? You're enough.
Well, I tell you what, I have been learning to, Scott, and it's changed my life. It is changing my life. And I don't know if you want to put me on the spot, but I was just thinking about, we've been talking about Enneagram, we've been talking about astrology, self-discovery. And one of the things that I've noticed in my life is that I struggled with for so many years. And this is a very four thing to struggle with, is feeling outside, and also fours in there, when it's not in its healthy expression, the four can tend to always be looking for the flaw in life, in themselves, always be trying to fix, and feeling hopeless and desperate that it's not possible. Right. So let's talk about astrology if you want to overlay these different systems. And that's what I really love to do, actually, is not just look at one system, because that can sometimes feel so limiting. But when I look at astrology and human design and the Strengths Finder and Myers-Briggs and Enneagram, I just love all of this shit so much. When you overlay it, all of a sudden it's like watching this composite image reflection of all these different mirrors. And I begin to see myself in all these different ways. It's like, oh my God. And there's so much overlap between these things. And it's like, oh, there I am. There I am. That's me. And one of the aspects of being, me and a four and all those things is, you mentioned envy earlier. I would tend to have a tremendous, like, pathological lack of confidence in myself. And it was an Achilles heel. I mean, I love to play sports, but I never had the confidence to usually take the big shot or to say, pass me the ball. I've got this, In my violin, I got to be very, very good at that. When I would get up in front to have the recital, a piece that I knew like flawlessly, I would choke. Something would happen, I would scratch the string and something, and it would just be like this, oh my God. And the tape in my head was, oh, there you go again. And because it became a pattern to the point where I just had so little confidence. And it was interesting that I was able to frame that in many cases as humility or self-deprecation. And so turn it into a virtue almost. And what's been interesting is, so I have a Taurus sun, Leo moon, and then a Sagittarius rising. Well, that moon sign, the moon side and sign, is really interesting to me because that tends to hold the shadow of the personality. It also tends to hold the emotions. And so what's interesting to me is eights often tend to be Leos, and Leos are like a natural Leo is they're born a rock star and they're born knowing it, and they are like very tend to be very comfortable in that. Like, I'm fucking magnificent, man. Like, I am
Uh-huh.
fucking magnificent. And that, oh my God, that would just make me, I just tend to hate people like that. I tended to hate people like that. And if I were honest, like, no, I hate them. I don't want anything to do with them. They're
Uh-huh.
way too confident. What it was is a reflection of my shadow. It's
Yeah.
like, I feel such lack. I feel such a lack of confidence. I don't believe in myself, and seeing it reflected like that in a Leo sun sign or
Yeah.
an eight, no, they just believe in themselves and they're here on a mission, and they know that everyone should line up behind them. That's been such an interesting point of self inquiry and healing over the years, Scott, is to go look what I'm seeing that I am so repulsed by in these other types is actually a reflection of what I need to heal and what I need to learn to
Yes.
open myself up to in my own life.
Yeah. And that applies to everything
Yeah.
again. I have a strong aversion to the energy of neediness,
Mm.
like extremely, extremely strong. And Jacob, I kid you not, maybe a year ago, I don't even remember where I was, but I remember like this light bulb going off in my head and saying out loud, "Oh my God, I'm completely needy." And it was the first time in my life it occurred to me that I am wildly needy. And
Mm.
so, of course, I have a strong aversion to neediness. I don't want to look at the aspects of myself
Mhm.
that hold that. And that's,
Mhm.
I feel like, I
Hmm.
hesitate to say always, but I feel like that's almost always going to be true.
Yeah.
What repels us is inside us, and there's something to look at there, and that is the shadow work.
I mean, Jung, and Jung's work actually influenced the Myers-Briggs system very deeply, and he used Enneagram, I think, or that was part of that development, and also astrology. He did thousands of astrology charts for his patients and clients. But Jung said, whatever irritates you about another is reflecting an aspect of in yourself that's asking to be healed.
Absolutely.
And so that, and sometimes that is so hard to accept, Scott,
I
because I'll
know.
look at a Donald Trump or you start going down the list of these people, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh my God, and it's so hard for me sometimes to look that squarely in the face and go, whew, what is this reflecting? What aspect of myself that I don't know how to accept about me or let it come into its light? What the fuck could that possibly be? Because I have everything about them is so repulsive. They're such hideous creatures, you know?
That's why I wonder, that's why I hesitate to say always with it, because I think that sometimes there are people who are so aggressive in
Hmm.
toxic aspects of their personality
Yeah,
that I don't believe my reaction to them is only because that's within me to that extent too that I need to,
sure.
I'm
Right.
like I think, and sometimes it is like they're really expressing an incredibly toxic aspect of their personality, but at the same time I do believe we all have everything inside of us. So if you take someone like Donald Trump, and even the things I find most grotesque about him,
Right.
he is an exaggerated version of all those things I find most grotesque, but I could dilute any number of those things to varying degrees and find all of that within me, because I do
Mhm.
believe we hold everything inside of us.
Yeah, like because this has been a really long, deep one for me because I'm with you, Scott. I'm not satisfied with a bumper sticker quotation that applies without any further inquiry in my life because I just don't find it to be very relevant in a lot of cases. And then it's like, well, was that true at all? But the more inquiry I've done into this particular part of what we're talking about, it's helped me understand directly to your point that no, it's not an exact mirror image of, but there's something about the energy, there's something about the quality of that if I'm willing to look at, it will allow me to grow more. That's what I've come
Absolutely.
to, and it feels like it softens that from being a really hard edge kind of dogma into okay. And also let's look at a Donald Trump, and that he's a really hard one for me because he is so repulsive to me in almost every way. But going, oh, there's somebody who is so self-assured, so in such conviction about the direction they're going. To me, it's so bound up around ego and the story about this is who I am, and it doesn't matter what other people need or think or feel. But just that. So if I back away from the most toxic expressions of it and allow myself to look in the mirror and say, well, I probably do envy more of that self-assuredness, more of that sense of conviction, more of that like fixed purpose. And so that's useful. And then it allows me to then open up to it and say, how can I begin to allow more of that in its most healthy expression into my life? And it's like, okay, all right, good.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also feeling like anything I'm looking at about myself that I'm seeing in the other person, the more healing I bring to that within myself,
Mm-hmm.
the more relaxed I'm going to be when I'm seeing it in the other person. That's just the way things work too. So the more
Mm-hmm.
healing I've done around my own envy, when I see envy in others, which is a repulsive for me energy to experience because I had so
Right.
much struggle with it inside myself. It's like I naturally hold so much more grace for them too. It's almost like, yeah, I get that. I'm that too. I because I'm willing to own it inside myself and not reject it and not shame it. So I'm less inclined to shame it in other people. It's just a nod of acknowledgement, a nod of, oh yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to quote a dear friend of mine who's very wise, Scott Stabile. He says that he says these things a lot. Everything is energy, and everything's connected. And so no, and so look, as I see something reflected that just makes me feel so angry or repulsed or whatever, if I'm willing to go within and begin to do more of that inquiry and that healing with it until I feel more peaceful in myself, it doesn't even matter then so much what this other person is doing out there that I find so hateful. It's,
Absolutely.
it's like if I do the healing work in myself, in the things that are being reflected there, I actually am in some way becoming the medicine in this world for myself, and that is affecting everything in this world.
Hallelujah, brother. I think that's a beautiful place to end.
You just wanted to end where I was quoting you, don't you?
We should have ended there. We'll have to edit it so it ends right after the quote. Well,
No,
we
listen,
don't have to
yeah,
end, but I love what you just said, and it kind of wraps up everything we've been
no,
saying
we're there.
beautifully.
I just want to acknowledge we started the show by talking about what a interesting, strange several weeks it's been, Scott. And that has reflected in just a lot less activity on, our podcast, like comments coming in, listens, all that sort of thing. I've noticed it across the board. Like there was just the sense of like all the sensitive people were just like this for a while, kind of in the cave. But we did get some comments, and I just want to acknowledge, thank you so much. I didn't see any questions that you and I need to chew on together, but I just want to say thank you so much for spending time to visit our site, heyjacobhiscott.com, or one of the YouTube videos or one of the podcast channels, and leaving a rating, a review, or a comment. That really means a lot, and we do pay attention.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'd like to invite listeners also to, if you have a hit on what Enneagram type I am,
Mm.
I'd be curious to hear what you think, if you feel compelled to share.
Oh, I
Is,
love that.
yeah.
That's
Is
a
there
that's a
anything?
cool invitation.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to promote, Jacob?
Well, we're almost there on being able to announce a writers retreat in the Bay Area, and when I do that, I'll be able to say who and all that stuff. So we're not quite there, but almost. That's been part of the last few weeks, actually, of you know venues, people's people just not getting back to me on my timeline, and so it's been kind of an interesting exercise in trust. And it's like, no, we have plenty of time. We'll just keep moving forward. So at the moment, no. What about you?
Well, I've got a workshop happening this weekend with. Do you know who Ruthie Lindsay is?
I think you've mentioned her name.
She's
I don't
become
know
a
her.
really dear friend. She's really awesome, and she's in Santa Fe for the month. So we're going to hold a
Hmm.
workshop, a live in-person workshop here in Santa Fe. So if you're in Santa Fe or know someone, tell them about it. I'll include the link. And then I'm going to be in Detroit giving a couple, visiting family and friends, and giving a couple live breathwork / mini workshops that I'm really excited about. So I'll put the link to those too if you're in the Detroit area. Come join me for those.
I'm going to let my envy fully off its leash here just for a second. I don't think we're really promoting this, but you're going up to see our mutual friend David Gandelman in Montana at this fucking gorgeous retreat center
Yeah.
up
I
above
take it that means you're
Kalispell.
not coming.
Man, I looked at plane tickets and then I looked at the 10 hours each way drive and what I'm up to in my life right now. And I just can't do it this year, but oh my God, I just want you to know I'm in full blown and unashamed envy.
I understand. I would be too. I support your envy. I acknowledge it and love it and embrace it.
Well, and you're teaching a session there, I see.
I'm going to be, offering some breath work there. Yeah.
I'm so
I think
excited for
several
you.
probably sessions, hopefully. So
I'm excited for you, and I'm excited the people who get to experience you and David together. That's, oh
Yeah,
my
me
God,
too.
seriously,
I love him. The three of us have to do something together at some point.
without any question. Like,
Yeah, that'll be
I
fun.
honestly, I actually right now still have the tab open on my browser where I was looking at plane tickets and mapping it, and also the tab open with his, registration page. And I just keep going back to it, and this is where I go into, okay, intuitively, am I just not giving myself the time and space to go and do something that would be amazing? And as I kind of journal about it and sit with it, it's like, okay, right now, this time, I'm going to have to sit out on the sidelines. But oh my God, I wish I could be there with you guys.
Yeah, it feels like you're giving yourself the time and space not to over schedule yourself. That's what it feels like. You know what I mean? Like you actually
Thanks for
are
that.
giving yourself time and space.
I appreciate the reflection, because my initial impulse when David made the invitation was absolutely, I want to. And so I really appreciate you reflecting that, because that is something I tend to overload myself. And I think my body pays the toll for that, so thank you. Thanks for letting me off the hook so nicely.
Yeah, sure, brother. Well, cool. Well, listeners, thank you so much for being with us. As always, we love you lots. And I love you, brother.
You too, my friend.
It's up to you to choose how good it can get, how much love you can let into your life, into your heart, before your mind decides it's too much. It's up to you to choose. It's up to you to choose.